Good morning. Welcome back to TACoS, Art and Microbes. Day 3. Today we're going to look at microbes for the first time. But before we get to that, let us look at what we did yesterday. So this was the image that Katla and I made yesterday with the stenciled out leaves. So as you can see, my first exposure probably wasn't quite long enough. So this is where I would use a feedback loop to figure out how to make a better image. If I had exposed the first image longer, then this would have gone to pure blue on the outside there. And that would have allowed it to look more like leaves with that texture inside them. I could have done the second exposure much longer as well. So basically everything could have gone much longer. I had a little bit of problems. We had a little bit of problems with the clouds coming on and shade and all that sort of stuff. But this will give you a rough idea of what you can do, what you can get away with these types of images. All right, so for today, we are looking at microbes, and this is where your construction paper and the scissors will come in handy to create some of your own microbes. Microbes! So there are some nice images of them. What are microbes? That's the first question. I'm not a scientist, but they're fairly simple things. They're basically any type of organism that is too small to see with the naked eye, so that you need a microscope. They can be bacteria, fungi, archaea, protists, or viruses. You've heard about viruses in the news a whole lot lately, obviously, but these are some various different forms of them. I personally like microbes and I enjoy working with them just because they're really cool looking. They do tons of different things, but they also take on these crazy forms and shapes. So as you'll see with Katla later, we'll be cutting them out and making different forms and ideas out of them as well. So I just wanted to show examples of a couple of the cooler microbes that I've run across, just to give you a sense of what you could do with them. Geogemma barosi. These are some ones that live in really extreme situations. They're in the vents of the ocean floor, 220 degrees Fahrenheit. They don't die until you get up to 266. That's really hot. So they have one of the highest known temperature tolerances of any animal, of any creature in the world. And they're these sort of crazy looking little wormy things. So worms are one example, one way to go with this project. Tardigrades or water bears are probably some of the most famous of microbes. These totally insane looking little things with tiny claws, they're everywhere. They are on moss and lichen, they're on our skin sometimes. They're called water bears because they look like tiny, tiny, tiny little bears. The coolest thing about them is that they can dry up and go dormant. So no water, they just sort of curl up in a little ball and become these little dormant things that you add water and they come back to life. They have survived in space. That's why they were in the news a little while ago. They were taken up to space, put in the void, the vacuum of space, and they survived. So they're fairly large for a microbe. You can almost see them, but not quite. You still need a microscope for them. People like to grow tardigrades. You can get these kits online where you can grow them and look at them and watch them, which is pretty cool. So you can cut yourself out a tardigrade. Euglena are sort of cool because they are a mixotrope. They are neither an animal nor a bacteria, nor a plant. They are a little bit of each of them. So they sort of are like an animal in that they can eat stuff, but they also photosynthesize like a plant. And they're these long sort of tubular green looking things. So they can curl up and take on different shapes. So you can cut out sort of weird versions of them. A little bit harder to cut out, but Alivibrio, probably pronouncing that wrong. These are awesome because they glow. They are consumed by baby squids and they live inside them and they provide that blending, glowing, color changingness that squids have. If you look up videos of colored squids and online, they're pretty awesome looking. So, and then here are just a couple other forms of them. So look through these sorts of things. Think about what you might want to cut out. Get some construction paper and start shopping and start making your own little microbes. And then we're going to do some photograms with the microbes that you've made. We're going to combine them with leaves and plants and other stuff and do some fun looking things. All right. All right, so Katla cut out some microbes out of the construction paper. We used one piece of construction paper and cut out a handful of them, and now we're going to do a first exposure with them. So Katla, come on over here and pull out the first sheet. So remember, try to do this in the shade as much as possible, and then we'll cover this up, set it down, and let's get your microbes onto it. Okay. Yep, they can come off the edge like that. That could look interesting. That's probably enough. Okay, now let's get the plexiglass onto it.
This one?
Yep. Cover it up. Make sure you cover the whole thing. Nice. And let's walk it outside. Got beautiful sun again. Because this construction paper isn't super thick, we're gonna do a slightly shorter exposure time. So I think we're gonna do about 7 minutes right now, especially since it's such beautiful daylight. All right, we'll come back in a moment and process it. We're starting. All right, the first microbes are ready. Katla, can you grab it all?
Yeah.
Whoa, you can see the really intense latent image on it. Let's show it to us for a second. Yeah, these are looking pretty good. All right, let's take it over and process it. So this is just one exposure of just the microbes. Let's see what they look like.
I'm trying to grab once while we expose it.
It's looking really good. Thanks for keeping it open like that. Okay. And as you can see, it's a fairly big blocky form. So our next exposure is going to be the double exposure. And we're going to add something to the microbes. All right. So we'll stop this now and we'll come back to that one. So now we're going to do a double exposure with the microbes. We're going to do a microbe exposure now, and then we'll do an exposure on top of that with the grasses. And we're going to try to do a much longer one than we did yesterday so that it gets really intense and only the grasses are available, are visible at the end of it. So let's put down the cloth for the first exposure. Let's get some microbes onto it. Come on. Okay, let's get some more. Got one more? Ooh, a spiky one.
It's a star.
Okay. All right, so let's get the cloth on.
I wonder what this will look like because I put it on top of it.
You run it outside? Yep. So we're gonna run it back outside and we're gonna give it a good 8 or 9 minutes of exposure. Okay, go take a place it in a spot. All right, this is looking great for the first exposure. Might be a little over, but it should be fine. We're gonna walk it inside just to make our lives a little bit easier and add the grasses to it in here. So let's get this guy and then put it right back outside. So let's get those grasses on here. Look at that great latent image. Cover it on up.
I want to put it on gently.
We're using some pretty cool tall grass on it. Hopefully that will add a really nice texture to it. And then we'll do about a 8-minute exposure. Let's split these two up. Okay, let's get the top back on and get it back outside.
Did we get both of these in the packet?
All right, this one's ready to process, the double exposure. Let's see how much the second exposure did to it. Let's run it over there.
And then we keep it out.
Yeah.
Well,
there we go. So we've got a faint line of the microbes, and then we've got the grasses inside where the microbes are, but not outside the microbes. That's the purpose of the double exposure. All right. So I'd say try to do one more, maybe get a third one with a double exposure of microbes and some other type of textural thing in the middle. And that will be it for today. And then we'll come back tomorrow. As one last little note, sometimes if you dry them out in the sun, they get a little bleached. And if that happens, all you have to do is take them back to some water and rewash them, especially with the hydrogen peroxide. But even without that, just rewashing them will bring the color back to them. Okay, and then dry it inside. So color's coming back a little bit, and that's much better. So if they get a little bleached that way, you can rejuvenate them with water and a little bit of hydrogen peroxide. So I would say maybe for the wash, the drying, do not dry them outside. Do not dry them in direct daylight.